Well, it's late, and for whatever reason, I've been thinking about my grandfather, so I'm going to tell you all a story that he told me when I was very young. Keep in mind, this is effectively just a family folk story. To the best of my knowledge, the story does not have base in either history or exaggerated history in any fashion, but here you go. Back when our family was still in Ireland, we lived in a coastal city, and we struggled. It was not very prosperous. Oftentimes, we were lucky to even get a decent amount of fish on the line. However, there was one year that the first fish we got was made of gold, and all of the fish started to be made of gold. And we could still get the meat from it, but the scales could be melted down into coin, creating a lot of wealth. And there slowly became more and more fish, creating more and more coins. My ancestors were able to use this coin properly. We created more infrastructure. We created better housing for ourselves. We got better utilities. We were able to make better things because we were able to get better materials. Our city slowly became more of a trade hub. And soon, people from all over the world went to our little city for trade, and the tale of the golden fish started to be told, and it eventually reached the ears of Olaf the Black. Olaf the Black was a king of the Isle of Man. However, he was on an economic downturn, and he was hoping to get his own fair share of the gold, and so he contacted the chieftain of the sept of the village. Negotiations took place, and they were long. The Manx king did not want to show too much desperation to this lowly noble, and our chieftain, proud of the new wealth of his own city, was perhaps too proud, too ambitious in his wants. However, eventually an agreement was made. New trading opportunities became open to both the Isle of Man and their city, and a wedding would also take place. Olaf's youngest daughter, Breed, would marry the chieftain's son, a warrior named Bran. It took her 9 days to reach our city for the wedding. On the way there, however, she gained the attention of a leprechaun who became enamored with her. The leprechaun began to follow Breed without her knowledge. The Aushi often did not show themselves to humans, even ones that they were infatuated with. She was nervous of her upcoming wedding. She had not met Bran before, only heard of his exploits. The leprechaun, to ease her, gave her gifts of seeds, acorns, and rocks. Fantastic rocks that naturally formed symbols that today we can still find in the Celtic Isles. On the 4th day, he scouted ahead, found a band of robbers that were attempting to steal from Breed and her entourage. He did not take kindly to this, and in a fit of rage, transformed into his true form and scared them off. After this, his obsession grew, and he became far less subtle in his intentions. The leprechaun started giving her more gifts, but this time they were not of nature. They were from the thieves' own stash of previously stolen goods, all jewelry of very fine make. Every day he gave one to her, but Breed did not think these were gifts, and unknowingly accepted them. She took them as signs that the marriage was going to go well and that her life in Ireland was going to be happy. On the 9th day, she reached the city, and it was all new and beautiful. She was awestruck, and she finally, for the first time, met Bran. And she was awestruck. His handsomeness was even more so than the stories tell. His strength was very obvious. He was a warrior of great renown, and it showed. She, for a moment, was immediately happy, and they took to know each other, and their marriage would happen the next day. The wedding had been prepared in glorious fashion. The setting was beautiful. It took place at the oldest grove outside the city, Everyone from our clan was there, as was the High King of Ireland, to witness the wedding. Bran stood there in his military uniform that he wore during the war, and Breed wore the most beautiful dress that anyone in our city had ever seen, and a necklace that the leprechaun had given her. Everything went according to plan, until the priest said, "Is there anyone who objects to this wedding as tradition?" And then, from the outside of the grove, you can hear, "I object!" in the most loud voice that anyone had ever heard, and there was the leprechaun in very fine garments, in a kilt that no one recognized except for the oldest of our clan. A man named Ceolwulf at Macbard recognized it as a symbol that this was a member of the Fey court. Everyone stood in silence. Everyone stood there stunned. No one wanted the union disturbed. However, no one also dared to strike or move against a she. The leprechaun made his case. Knowingly or not, Breed had accepted gifts from him and therefore entered into a contract, and a contract from him would involve that she never get married to a mortal. However, in what the leprechaun would state as uncharacteristic generosity, he would allow Bran and himself to enter into a competition. Whoever won 2 out of 3 would win. If Bran won, he could marry Breed, and the contract would be lifted. The first competition would be the next day, and it would be a race on top of steeds. The leprechaun then proceeded to summon a unicorn, and he rode off in style. The race was already considered unwinnable by many in attendance. Unicorns have many magical properties. This includes being faster than even the most well-bred of horses of royal stock. And Ceolwulf simply advised Bran to show up with any steed, because not showing up at all would mean the forfeit of the challenges, and therefore the forfeit of his right to marriage. Bran wasn't sure what to do. He walked to his family's personal grove and prayed to Brigid. He prayed for many hours. At midnight, he was tired and finally stopped. But it is said that before it reached 12:01, Brigid came to him, took pity on his plight, and granted him use, for the day, Serb, the horse-sized ram who was king of sheep. Bran was able to get some sleep, though his dreams were filled with troubled nightmares of losing and what that would mean. However, when he arose, he was able to find a saddle that could fit Serb, and he made his way to the location of the race. The entire clan was still there. They all cheered for Bran as he rode in on Serb, and the leprechaun was shocked, but was sure he would win. The race would be 100 meters, and it was very rough terrain, and he was sure he would still win. However, as Serb was a ram, he was able to traverse the terrain with ease, even able to use his horns to break an obstacle in his path. And by an inch, Serb beat the unicorn. This angered the leprechaun. The leprechaun accepted the loss, however stated that from now on, the challenges were to simply be the natural abilities of the 2 participants. No help, divine or otherwise. Bran accepted this, not wanting to forfeit anything. The next challenge was declared. 2 days from now, Bran and the leprechaun were to participate in a grappling match. Bran thought nothing of it, accepted, as he himself was a very well-built man. I believe you kids would say that he looked similar to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. However, Bran has not seen his true form, and only Ceolwulf Macbard had any inkling that this was a trick. A meeting took place between Bran, his father, the chief of the clan, and the High King. It was decided that tomorrow would be a training day. The chief's son, Seamus, the Red Lion of Galloway, who was a warrior in his own right, but that's another story, would train with Bran. After the meeting, he grabbed an apple and went to feed Serb as an sort of offering, thanking him for his service, but he was already being fed by Breed. He walked up to Breed, and he asked a very simple question. No one's asked your opinion on this. Do you even want to get married? Breed wasn't sure what to say. It was a confusing situation for her. She had a duty to her father, and she liked Bran so far, but wasn't sure. She was scared of marriage, but the leprechaun would forfeit that. And ultimately, Breed at least wanted the option. In a rather awkward case of trying to comfort her, Bran simply said, "You are the most beautiful woman to bless their presence on the Ire in a very long time. And I make this promise. Ultimately, it will be your choice. Even if I win these challenges, I hold you to nothing. It will be your choice if we get married. Alliances, agreements, and treaties be damned." Breed didn't know what to say. Simply responded, "Thank you, my lord." Bran fed Serb the apple, turned to Breed and said, "I hope you enjoy your stay here, regardless of how long that is." He went to his cabin to sleep. When Bran awoke, there was an intruder in his cabin, and this intruder was obviously not human. Bran was nervous, but asked the intruder why it was there, and simply said, "I am dealing with enough of the she. I don't need any more trouble." The intruder laughed, introduced himself as a Chlorchorn, a relative and something of a rival with the leprechaun, and simply said, "I am here to offer a gift because I want to see the leprechaun fail these challenges. This is an armband that will give you enough strength to keep the leprechaun in your grasp easily, or at least far easier than on your own skill." Bran thought about it, but his honor would not let him take it, and simply said, "I am honored, but I cannot accept this gift." The Glorshorm accepted and said, "Good luck. You'll need it." Bran trained the hardest he's ever trained. More than war, more than any specific duel. And he did his best not to be harmed. And he wasn't. He didn't get a sprained ankle or anything. He didn't break anything. Though he ended up being very stressed about it. The next day was the day of the grappling match. He showed up. So did the leprechaun. But the leprechaun indeed had something up his sleeve. No one knew of his true form. Before the match, he turned into his true form. What humans would definitely consider monstrous, and what most people don't know, leprechauns are 10 feet tall in their true form. The leprechaun only trusted Ceolwulf Mac Bard as the judge. Ceolwulf accepted. Bran, even as a human of peak physical conditioning at the time, could only do so much. The leprechaun's knees were as big as his head, and the size of tree trunks. They only had so much give. He attempted his best to go for his knees, to weaken the leprechaun, but nothing seemed to work. And eventually the leprechaun just seemed to have enough with toying with Bran, and so put all of his weight on him. With his back to the ground, Ceolwulf did the slowest count he could, but ultimately counted. 1, 2, 3. Bran was pinned. He had lost the second challenge. The loss was devastating, but ultimately destined to go that way. There were no tricks on the leprechaun's part, aside from hiding his true form. He indeed only used his natural strength. Bran begrudgingly accepted, and although angry, lost fairly.
if you want to put it like that. And the leprechaun announced that the next 2 days, the challenge would proceed and would have the ultimate judge, Breed herself. Each, the leprechaun and Bran, would spend a day with her, and she would get to choose the winner of the competition and decide her fate. Effectively, they each got a chance to go on a date with her, and she would choose the winner, the best date. The leprechaun allowed Bran to go first. Now it is said that this is not out of generosity. It is believed that he did this because he knew Bran wouldn't be able to compete in the same way as he, and the leprechaun's date would therefore be more memorable as being the more recent one by the time Breed had to judge. But only the leprechaun truly knows for sure. Bran had an idea, and he went with it. The next day, he took Breed to an ancient site of the clan. It was a burial mound that was still well looked after, and at the burial mound there was a display, a spear made of bronze. It was said to belong to the founder of the clan as a whole. It fought in many wars and was very important, almost of religious significance to the clan, and he wanted to share this. Bran and Breed would spend the rest of the day exchanging stories about their family. Bran even eventually talked about the war. It was not an easy conversation, however, it was something he was known for, and it was bound to come up, and he told her about many things, some of which were not easy. War is not easy on the individual, and not all things in war are glorious. Ultimately, they had fun, and that was the important thing. They would spend the night with his immediate family, where they had a small feast. Bran's father and mother even told both of their interpretations of what happened at their wedding, which was smaller in scale and obviously no leprechaun in their story, but was an interesting story in of itself. They ultimately set Breed a little at ease and told her things that were important in their family. Bran walked Breed to her sleeping quarters as the night came to a close. Therefore, his time with her for the competition would end, and he would need to be separated from her. He kissed her on the forehead and said, "Whatever you choose, we will accept it. Just know, you are always welcome, no matter what." Breed had a lot to think about as he walked away. This was the first time that they had more than just a moment together. They had made attempts to talk before, but this was the longest that they had spent together. And she indeed felt glad to have spent the time. The culture shock between even Manx and Irish was severe to her. There was a lot of shock, but ultimately she did feel at home here. Everyone made her feel welcome. Everyone made her feel at home, and Brad did his best to make sure that she was comfortable. The next day was the leprechaun's turn. After she was ready and dressed, the leprechaun knocked on the door to her sleeping quarters. He acknowledged her and kissed her hand. They went for a walk to a nearby ruin. This ruin cannot be found today. It has been destroyed and constructed over. But this ruin was a gateway to the land of youth, the world of the Sidhe. He could not take her beyond the border of these lands, as most mortals were not capable of going past that border. But the border alone was beautiful. Colors she had never seen before, creatures that were said to be so beautiful that were beyond comprehension, plants that seemed more alive. It was all striking to her. She would never forget this experience. The leprechaun continued showing Breed through what of the borderlands he could. Eventually, they reached a watering hole. There, the leprechaun and Breed saw a family of unicorns, a very small herd, a mother, father, and 3 young'uns. Of different age, but they were all still children. It was
amazing. Bree knew that she would be one of the only people to have ever seen this period, much less, seeing a unicorn at all. But it was something she knew that she was being honored for. And it was partially because she didn't keep the honor for herself. She understood that the honor was within nature itself. So she understood why the leprechaun liked her. But ultimately, there was no real connection between herself and the leprechaun, beside the fact that the leprechaun, was obviously infatuated with her. And she knew the reasons why, but there was no connection. They talked, but mostly about what was around them. And so ultimately, when it became her time to judge, she indeed chose Bran, because the connection was there. But she did take a moment with the leprechaun, and said, "You have shown me so much, things that I know that I would have never seen otherwise. In almost any other context, I probably would have chosen you. But I truly believe that this is where my line will continue. And I hope that we can accept that, and that you will not, begrudge my decision." The leprechaun, while sad, agreed. And the leprechaun, while not completely understanding, did understand that humans think differently. Things are important to us that would not necessarily be important to them. And he simply bowed out, thanked her for her time, and it is said that he still protects the children of that line, of our line. The next day, the actual wedding between Bran and Bree took place, and it was glorious. It was a feast beyond measure. Ultimately, Bran would eventually become Chief of the Sept, and because of both being from the clan of Spears, and Bree coming from the line of Olaf the Black, our Sept would forever become known as the Sept of Black Spears. Thank you all for watching. I know it's been a ride, and I know I might have rushed the last bit, but I really do appreciate everyone listening to this.